a lot of her opponents would mock her because they thought she wasn't very clever. Now,
Mm.
obviously, she was clever because she had like a chemistry degree and she was a tax lawyer. What they meant was she wasn't a very sort of she didn't like read poetry and didn't say these kind of clever things at dinner parties or whatever, right? Or she hadn't read some of the political philosophy they'd read. But what she did have with these kind of virtues of leadership, she was very determined, very hardworking, quite courageous, quite capable of, famously like holding her position, like being embattled quite a lot of the time. And these are very, very important things in a leader. Probably most of all, she was decisive. And like Barack Obama has spoken about this. He wrote that article where he said basically the job of the president is to make hundreds of decisions every day. And what makes you a good president is if you can do that and make good decisions, which sounds very trivial, but of course it isn't. It's hugely significant. Margaret Thatcher was a wonderful decision taker. She really had this quality where she could just, you know, go through decisions. And she said, it's so interesting. Whenever I'm in a room of men, they're all dithering, and I just make decisions. And I think she was surrounded by these people who like to talk, but didn't like to do. Whereas she was very good at governing on paper. She'd get into the details of documents, underlining things and writing detailed notes. She would get really, really into the close detail after hundreds of pages, which anyone who follows modern politics will know. Our politicians are not famous for sitting up late at night in their office and like really being into the details, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these were the kinds of qualities that she had. She obviously attributed it to being a woman, and she had all these theories about how women were better than men and all that sort of thing. I think it was more to do with innate personality, coming from a Methodist background, coming from her father owned a shop, so the whole family had to sort of work for the shop. Just coming from that culture where if you didn't keep working, nothing would turn. You know what I mean? The shop doesn't run itself. So I think that's probably got more to do with it. But um, partly being a woman, and literally everyone around her is a man, with very few exceptions, and partly these are all very rich upper class Englishmen, and they've all been at the same schools. And she comes from a closer to a working class background. She will obviously be horrified at that suggestion, but she's much more middle class. And so she's constantly having to defend herself on two fronts. She's not just the woman in the room, she's the middle class woman in the room. And there's a very revealing moment. Is it okay to swear? Is it?
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Her own foreign secretary. So like her second or third most important minister, right? The equivalent of, what is it in America? Secretary of State. Says, if I have any more trouble from this fucking petty bourgeois woman, I'm quitting. Right now, like that's so withering and so sexy. I mean, it's just, you can't believe it. But that's kind of like, that was the basic attitude she was up against. When she was leader of the party, she went to see the Lord Chancellor, which is a kind of fancy English thing for a senior member of the judiciary, but who's also in the government. And he wrote in his diary that she and her husband looked like a butler and a cook who'd come to ask for a job in his house. She was just constantly seen as this little nobody.
Yeah.
And so she was forced into having that decisive, determinative sort of, I'll show you all. And I think that, like again and again in her career, that just comes back so strongly.